Welcome to Progress, Not Perfection, an MLK Celebration. I'm Reverend Sandra Campbell, Associate Minister for Unity Temple on the Plaza in Kansas City, Missouri. And I also serve as Executive Director of Unity Urban Ministerial School and on the board of Unity World Headquarters. On behalf of Unity, we thank you for joining us for this important conversation about how together we can fulfill the dream of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I want to introduce the people you will be hearing from today. Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith, founder and spiritual director of Agape International Spiritual Center. Reverend Sunshine Daye, author, keynote speaker, and a spiritual leader dedicated to discovering and discarding the beliefs that no longer serve you. Miss Ester Nicholson, coach, author, speaker, recording artist, and founder of Soul Recovery. Alexandra Scott, who is certified in diversity, equity, and inclusion. She currently serves as Unity's talent acquisition and diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist and senior human resources generalist in the People Support Department. Today, we celebrate Dr. King as a leader in the American Civil Rights Movement. Through peaceful protest, he sought equality and human rights for African Americans, the economically disadvantaged, and all victims of injustice. It was Dr. King who said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." So today we remember Dr. King's legacy and his dream that one day people would be judged by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. Again, thank you for being here. And here are your hosts for this event, Reverend Sunshine Daye and Miss Ester Nicholson.
Hello, my friends. I'm Esther Nicholson, and I am so incredibly honored to be with you today. Welcome. And I am so incredibly honored to be sharing this platform with the amazing, powerful spirit and consciousness of Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith and my colleague and one of my dearest friends, Reverend Sunshine Daye, as we talk about the legacy and the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, his consciousness of oneness wasn't just about the liberation and equality of Black people, but about oneness and equality of all people. Now, his consciousness of forgiveness and nonviolence was not about condoning racism and abuse, but about the transcendence of it. And from that transcendence, how we are guided to divine right action. I believe that Martin Luther King was the Buddha and Jesus consciousness of our time. And it was only that level of consciousness that strengthened him and led him to be the kind of leader he was, and that for his legacy to live on today. So welcome again. Hi, Sunshine. It's so good to be with you.
It's so great to be with you, Esther. This is amazing that together you and I get this opportunity to not only celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy, but that we also get an opportunity to, to hang out with one another and really bring forward the legacy in a 2022 kind of way.
Absolutely.
A lot of times when I think about Dr. King and what he did in the 60s, many of us, including myself, can think, oh gosh, that was so long ago. Certainly we've gotten far beyond that. And as I look, there are still so many lessons and so many things to harvest and glean from his legacy, from his words, from his actions. And so I want to kick it back to you for a little bit. Like, what does his legacy and his life mean for you? Like, how is that still impacting you today? Because you do amazing work in the world, and we're still dealing with oppression, and we're still dealing with bias, conscious and unconscious bias. How does Dr. King's legacy and his life still impact you today?
I was thinking earlier, I don't know my life without Dr. Martin Luther King being an influence. I was born into his influence in my life. And then to be a spiritual teacher today, and of course my own personal spiritual practice with the divine, just realizing that everything that he stood for are based in immutable principles. That's why they're timeless. That's why they still make such sense today. That's why they're so important today, just like Buddha, just like Jesus. Those, they weren't trends of the time. They are immutable principles that never change. And so what I am seeing in the midst of what appears to be a breakdown in society regarding racism and unbiased racism and systemic racism and all of that, I'm looking at it as a divine breakthrough, because I understand that in order for there to be a reconstruction, there has to be a deconstruction. That everything that is up to for healing right now is being revealed, in a very intense way. But I'm looking at it, of course, it's painful, and you look at it and, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and it's painful, but it's also a blessing, because this is the deconstruction of systemic and institutionalized and unconscious racism that is like just so in our face right now, that has galvanized the planet in a way that hasn't been done since the civil rights movement. So I'm happy. I'm grateful.
Yeah, and because we go way back, because we've been in and out of one another's lives, we've been able to see the change that spiritual practice, like who you are today as a result of Dr. King and his influence and your spiritual practice and your depth and your weight is not who I met over 35 years ago.
Absolutely not.
and I'm sure that I'm not the same. And his legacy and what it means for me is not only around racism, but like all forms of oppression. I mean, being an out lesbian, being someone who is in the queer community, being someone who is in the recovery community, and being someone who's been in what people would call disenfranchised communities, communities that have faced lots of injustice. The words of Dr. King and his message and what he stood for and his integrity is not only about racism, but it is indeed about injustices and those of us who fall into marginalized communities, and how our spiritual practice, how our integrity, how our standing for something is so key and so important. And the two of us share Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith, who
absolutely. so just to let everybody in on where Sunshine is coming from. We're both in recovery, and I believe Sunshine has like 35 years of recovery. I have 35 years of recovery, and we met 35 years ago in those rooms of recovery. And then we met again at Agape as we began our spiritual training there under the powerful leadership of Dr. Michael Beckwith. So it is just an honor for us to have this conversation with him today.
Yeah, one of the things about Michael that I so love, that it's always about the healing. It's always about the revealing of the truth of who I am, the truth of who you are. And when we got a chance to sit and talk with him, one of the questions that I was able to ask him is, how do the unhealed areas of our life affect the elimination of racism and of bias and oppression of all forms? So let's check out what he had to say.
Oh God, I'm excited to hear that.
I think there's a couple of reasons. One, people are afraid of what they think is the other. Anyone that's different from them, whether it's skin color, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's religion, people are afraid of the other. And that comes from a deep sense of insecurity. When one is insecure about their own identity and insecure about their own self in the world, when they see other, they have a tendency to attack, and they also have a tendency to project their unhealed areas of their own life onto the fabric of what is called the other. So until people are able to embrace themselves, fall in love with themselves, and find that space within themselves that is literally and spiritually connected with everyone else, you continue to have this kind of projection, this kind of fear, and this kind of insidious a movement in the world. And of course, it happens on different levels. Some people just become indifferent to the other. And then some people become actually actively hating the other. And then all those particular ramifications in between. And so it's going to take, a lot of progress obviously has happened, with racism. A lot of progress has happened with sexual orientation identification, but there needs to be more. We're growing. We have to grow into a society where we actually embrace each other, but we don't call the person the other. That person is connected to us at a deep level in citizenry, in a spiritual connection at the center where God is. And that's going to take more education, more individuals having spiritual insight, more individuals consciously working on it, finding that place within themselves where they see separation, but own it. And then say, I got to do some work on myself in this area, so that they're able to, heal, because it's actually, racism, it's a psychological disease, not just, oh, he's a hater or she's a hater. That's a disease. It's a psychological disease of casting another individual into an inferior role and calling them the other. And I think there has to be more education, just as people know if they're an alcoholic, that's a disease. If they have cancer, that's a physical disease. There are emotional diseases. Well, racism and homophobia, those are psychological diseases, you see.
Wow. There were so many gems that he dropped there. And one of the gems that I want to address immediately is that racism is a psychological disease.
Yeah.
And I've been teaching this for years, that racism has its foundation in spiritual disconnection, emotional dysfunction, and also physiologically, right? Which then creates this dependence and this addiction to a certain belief system and to our indoctrination and all of that. And, so many people, and I totally understand this, because there's been such heinous acts in the name of racism and in the name of otherness, that you look at the people who have acted on this and said, oh my God, they're just evil. They're racist, they're horrible. And you know what? The acts are horrible. And that's what we're here to do, is to just heal that. But the root cause of those acts is because there is a spiritual disease that's underneath that. And that until we start addressing that, and it's not that, we don't need to be in action and change and all of that kind of stuff, but until we heal the cause, we cannot heal the effect. And so for him to say that was just really powerful. And if we could just, I just invite everyone to just take that in. You don't even have to believe it, or you don't have to agree with it right now, but just take that in. Is it possible that racism is a spiritual and emotional disease?
Yeah. And to take that, to take that interior look, to be able to say, self, what's up right now?
Right.
That dis-ease is that belief and idea in separation. I love that he said that we actually believe that there is the other. And it reminds me of a poem that I love, that I keep on my wall, that says que tú eres mi otro yo, like you are my other me. And when I harm you, I'm harming myself. But when I honor and respect you, I'm honoring and respecting myself. That there is no other. And that talk with self, like self, get it together here. There is no other. That is a practice, and that is the part that gets to be healed and revealed. That's the part, and it's not a walk in the park. Believe me, there are times where I want to, I am so invested in you hurt me or you did this to me, and I'm so invested in the you-ness and the me-ness that just having some grace and just, coming back to this is a dis-ease, this is a disease, and I get to heal that. And I think that's one of the keys of what's so important about our work as humanity, as a divine humanity that we are, that we get this opportunity to look at this idea and this deep belief in separation that doesn't mean us any good, that we are indeed at our core, that life essence in me is the life essence that you are, and that that is what gets to be healed a little bit at a time, huh?
Key to freedom is
Yeah.
when we can finally come to the realization, and it is a spiritual realization. It's not an intellectual one. It may start,
Right.
and actually, most realizations start intellectually, but when we're doing our own spiritual work and we tap into that divine and we tap into the infinite allness, it's not something that we're, that a conclusion that we've come to intellectually, that there is no otherness. It is a spiritual experience. We just get it. We just be it. We just know it, that you are me and I am you.
Yeah.
And we are one. And that heals everything, right? And so it does take patience and self-kindness and self-awareness, because I love what he said is that, we have to own our stuff.
Yeah.
And I like to say that you can't acknowledge what you're not aware of, and you can't heal what you won't acknowledge. And so as we become willing, just open to discover and explore, that self-examination, I think of the Socrates that says an unexamined life is a life not worth living. And
Yeah.
so if, just from a place of humility and self-love and self-compassion, just go within and look at our own biases and our own racism, which is so much more than about race and ethnic groups. We're racist against people who get vaccinated or who don't get vaccinated. We're racist against people who, want to get tested and want to wear a mask and who refuses to do that. So, own it. And as we own it, then we are led to release it. And as we release it, we come back into the realization of oneness.
Yeah.
So yeah. So one of the other questions that we discussed with Michael was, how do you respond when someone comes at you with just overt racism and they want to harm you and they're, abusing you verbally, or you're so, the systemic or the institutionalized racism is so obvious, or maybe they're even expressing that in a subtle way. How do you respond to that versus being reactionary? And I loved his answer on that. So check this out.
I think that, we take our cue from Martin Luther King Jr., who would teach you about, in terms of activism and in terms of standing up for oneself, in terms of embracing who we are, we're always coming to an understanding that the individual that's hating, the individual that's seeking to oppress, individual that's seeking to strike a blow on us, eventually we're seeking to win them over, so that in our own heart, we're not creating a circle that they don't exist. So that even though it's hard at times, somewhere within us, we have to find enough love where we realize that person is sick, that person is ill. And I think that when the heart is big enough, then there's moment by moment appropriate action. Sometimes the action is to go into deeper conversations. Sometimes the action is to leave that particular space because it's not safe. You end up finding the appropriate action. I can remember at one of the Asilomar conferences, I'd gone off campus and most people know, what I'm talking about. We had the annual retreats for the United Church of Religious Science back in the day when that's what it was called. I remember going off campus to a restaurant, and I was standing in line. There was two couples in front of me, some people behind me. I was like third in line. And so the hostess would come and seat the people. Then I was next. And she reached behind me to get the person behind me to seat. So I'm looking around to see what's going on. So I say, excuse me, I was standing here, I was next in line, and the lady turned beet red. She didn't see me. I'm standing there. She didn't see me because I was not a part of her normal environment. This Black man in this mainly white town, she didn't even notice me. And she went so far out of her way to try to make you feel comfortable. Let me give you the best seat. Let me bring you more water. What else do you need? You want some chips? She just went through this whole thing. And I had to finally I said, listen, you don't have to do this. Just let this be a lesson that we exist in this society, and that you have to see us as well. You may not see us every day, but, Ralph Ellison had a book called The Invisible Man, which spoke about that phenomena. But I can remember by the time I left the restaurant, she had apologized 20 million times. But by the time I left the restaurant, we had a good conversation. We had a good dialogue about her blindness of seeing a person of color in that restaurant. And I know it impacted her and probably changed her point of view as she went on. So, that was just a moment of, I'm not going to throw stuff. I'm not going to overturn tables. I'm, just like, hey, whoa. I'm here. See me. Yes, I'm a Black man. And yes, I have money to sit here to buy food, and we had a wonderful discourse. Now that always can't happen. Kathy Mack and I we were going to the movies one day, Reverend Kathy McNamara, and I was waiting we were in the parking lot, and I was waiting for a car to pull out. And so I'm waiting there, and these guys behind me, these three white guys, started screaming the N-word at me. Get out the way, just like Reverend Kathleen was like shocked, because this was not too long ago, and I just held my cool, waited and parked, and she was looking at me like, she says, that still happens? I said, unfortunately it does, unfortunately it does. But I don't allow myself to ever feel like I'm a victim. I'm aware that those three men in that car, they have a problem. We're always trying to keep the circle big enough for everyone to fit in. And then on the soul level, we do what is appropriate in the moment. Sometimes what's appropriate in the moment is some strong activism. Sometimes what's appropriate in the moment is to leave for safety. Like I wasn't going to take on those three guys in that car. I wasn't going to say anything to them because that was going to inflame a very bad situation. Although I was looking for a weapon in my car in case they were to come, I was going to definitely defend myself, but I didn't inflame the situation. And so there's always an appropriate moment that our soul will lead us to. And we have to understand that this is a protracted experience, a protracted, what's the word? It's an endeavor, it's a journey that's not going to just change overnight. We've seen progress, but this is a continuation of work that's been done for years. So we're the next individual that is in this particular marathon until we realize ultimately that this is a way of living, to actually stand up for ourselves, to fall in love with ourselves, to not feel ashamed of who we are, and to act appropriately in a given moment to make a change. But it's not we can't get like, oh, this shouldn't be this way. No, it is this way. This is the way it is for some people. Yeah. And so once we understand that, it's like recently I was with somebody that I knew, and I kept expecting them to act better in a certain situation. And finally it dawned on me, this person has no desire to act better. That's not even in their DNA. They just want what they want, and they don't care how they get it. And once I saw that, they no longer bothered me, because I wasn't trying to fit them in a mold of well, they've studied these teachings for X amount of years. They should do this or act like this. It's like they had no desire. And it no longer bothered me because they were them and I'm me.
Wow.
That's so amazing. I mean, one of the first things that comes to mind from what he's talking about is to be so spiritually fit, or even just to be so aware that we don't have to react, meaning to act again just out of default and fall into the same behaviors that oh, you didn't see me? Well, I don't see you. Or you're going to call me the N-word? Well, I'm going to call you an N-word or whatever. But that he, like Dr. King, are so steeped in practice that it's about inviting in, like when there can be conversations, so that we have a deeper understanding of one another, that we're not participating in today's culture of cancel culture. Oh, you said this, cancel. I don't even know you. I don't see you. We're not going to promote you. We're not going to do. No, but instead that there is, again, this sense of oneness, like that is really my other me that is unaware of what's happening. Kind of like, forgive them for they know not what they do. But that opportunity to engage in conversation, to lovingly educate or inform or be with one another during this process, because it's not going away right away. We get to heal these areas of our lives where we see the other, where we're still acting as if we're separate, as if we're not one humanity. You got a lot out of that. I saw you going, yep.
Well, first of all, I really loved, and I think it's very important to point out that there's been a lot of progress. A lot of things have come to the light in the last 3 years. And I think everything that has come to the light in the last 3 years is a part of that progress. It's a part of the education that Martin Luther King started in the 60s many years ago. And so we want to acknowledge that there has been a lot of progress and that we are continuing to progress. And that when an illusion has been practiced more than the truth has been practiced, that it's going to take a while for that to clear out, so that love that will always have the final word can just take over and dissolve that into the nothingness from which it came. So we are making progress. A couple of other things he said about seeing these men that approached him and going within and coming to the realization immediately, oh, this is not my problem. You have a problem. This has nothing to do with me. And it absolutely, sunshine, into our audience, it absolutely takes spiritual practice moment by moment to dissolve the resistance, the defensiveness, the fight, the flight, freeze, or flee consciousness, so that we can be calm enough to be able to allow the wisdom and the safety to hear what we're being directed to do, whether we're being directed to flee, whether we're being directed to walk away, whether we're being directed to be wholly interested in what this person just said or did and inquire into that. I mean, I remember I went to a chiropractor who's a very good friend of mine, and we're dialoguing and having this conversation, and he says to me, Esther, you are so articulate to be a Black woman. Ooh. And I felt shock in that moment, but Spirit took me over, and the first thing I said was, gee, you don't get out much, right? And then we dialogued about what that meant, where he was coming from when he said that. And he was actually appalled that was the conscious, that he was coming from an indoctrination and a way of being that was just automatic, that's what he thought, right? So it is through our spiritual practice and our lowly listening, as Michael calls it, that we can trust that we're going to be guided to divine right action, whatever that is. And I think that a lot of people misunderstand spiritual practice and being led and guided to no action. That is not what that means at all. That doesn't mean that you're just going to sit by and just allow abuse and all of that kind of stuff. It means that you're going to respond from your divine self versus react from your fearful self.
Yeah.
Which is so much more effective. But there is one thing that Michael said that interests me. And when he said, that he was looking for a weapon to defend
in his car. Yeah.
And how, Martin Luther King, what he stood on was nonviolence.
Right.
And Jesus the Christ talked about turning the other cheek. Now, check this out. I know the kind of consciousness and the level of consciousness that they had to be in to talk about turning the other cheek when you're attacked, or those protesters in the civil rights movement who just sat there with such dignity and grace while they were being attacked with dogs and water hoses and all of that kind of stuff. And so again, I understand that, it's like, I'm not there yet. Right. And I understood what Michael was talking about, where, you will be guided to divine action. And maybe that divine action at times is like, I'm not going to let you attack my family or physically attack me or whatever. I'm going to do what I need to do to defend myself. But I just think that that's really interesting. And that's something for all of us to look at.
You're absolutely right. And, with that, we experience that kind of bias, prejudice, those kinds of verbal attacks, sometimes even, physical attacks. And when we talk to Michael, he gives some direction. He gives us some direction on as to how to deal with personal experiences of racism, personal experiences of oppression. And so when we ask them, like, what's the most powerful message you have for those of us who still today experience racism and experience oppression, here's what he had to say.
Absolutely. So to everyone who is in a marginalized or oppressed identity, or way of people thinking about one, a lot of our main work is just self-love and appreciation. So we don't take on the projection that other people would put on us, because our reaction determines oftentimes how much we really love ourselves. And so if we have any misgivings about who we are, and then someone shoots a dagger at us, that reaction will determine, do we really love ourselves, or are we really reacting to what this person is saying? I remember the story again of Dr. King, and Dr. James Lawson told me this. They were obviously cohorts in the movement of building the beloved community, and James Lawson was known as Dr. King called him the best nonviolent strategist during that particular time. He told me one time him and Dr. King walked into this event where Dr. King was going to be the main speaker, and he walked into the auditorium, and this man came up to him and said, "Are you Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.?" Dr. King said, "Yes, I am." And the man spat on him in his suit. And Dr. King reached and pulled out a handkerchief and wiped off the spittle and folded it up and handed it back to the man. He says, "Sir, I think this belongs to you." And went up and did his talk. That was like the epitome of, this has nothing to do with me.
Right.
What you think about me. I think this belongs to you. And I remember when Dr. Lawson told me that, it just really hit me really hard, that he had that kind of self-awareness. Somebody else may have hit the guy, ushered him out of there or spat back at him. And I'm not saying there aren't times where you have to defend yourself or, you know. He said, I think this belongs to you, and went up. So, but he had very strong self-awareness, you see, and he didn't take on the issue of that man. And I think we all have to grow. We have to keep doing our inner work so that if anybody says anything about us, calls us out of our name, whether it's the N-word or whatever, it has nothing to do with me. Yeah, I'm Black. Okay.
Woo! I continue to experience different forms of oppression, and to be able to have the wherewithal through my spiritual practice to constantly still, bring it back to me, that's their issue, just like in the last segment, right? That's their issue. And that the focus gets to be me. Like, I get to know who I am. I appreciate Dr. King's integrity in that moment, right? Because I think if we were to ask anybody today, if someone came up to you and spit on you, what would you do? Right? And for the integrity that he displayed to his own self, to the stand that he took of nonviolence, to just the awareness that he knew, like, this has nothing to do with me. This has all to do with you.
Well, not just the integrity, but the mastery.
Yeah.
It takes mastery to be able to respond to something that disgusting and blatant in such an elegant way. Such a teaching moment, to hand it back and say, I believe this belongs to you. And I like to say, if there's not a button there to be pushed, then your button can't be pushed.
Wow.
So if I have some insecurity about who I am, when you say certain things about me, I'm going to react and I'm going to be triggered. But if I've cleared that up, all of those illusions that I've held about myself, and I have come into the realization of my magnificent individualized expression as an expression of the divine, you can say whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. And I'm so clear about who I am. When I think I'm not a Bible scholar, but I think, Jesus was really cool with Judas. Like he was like, I know you betrayed me. You cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's like, wow, that takes spiritual mastery. And, we're going to talk later on about the practices that you and I are engaged in to come into that mastery. And I think, before we even go into that, I think one of the biggest, most important keys to that is patience and consistency.
Yeah.
That allows, of course, you're not going to do that from here.
No.
You can't heal the problem at the level of the problem.
Right.
You have to transcend the problem in order to respond from here. So,
and you got to lose your mind to find your soul. And that's soul recovery, right? And that's what I've witnessed and appreciate about you, Esther. That you are not just talking the talk, that you are walking the walk. And in your discovery of your magnificent self, you've allowed your creativity, not only in being an author, but being an amazing, practitioner and artist and vocalist and lyricist. And you actually wrote a song about this particular incident. Would you share a little bit more with everybody about that? Because it's an awesome story.
Oh my God, it's like, and it's such a God story because I wasn't expecting it. I flew to Denver, Colorado, to co-write with my best friends, soul brother and sister, J.D. Martin and Jan Garrett. And I flew out there for us to write a song together. And we're sitting around the piano and they're like, what do you want to write about, Esther? And I said, forgiveness. And it just came through. Boom. I hadn't even thought of it before that moment. I know I heard it somewhere, but I hadn't thought of it before that moment. I said, this is an amazing song about Dr. Martin Luther King. I told the story And they're like, that's the first verse. That's the first verse of the song. And that's how this amazing song, I Believe This Belongs to You, was written and created.
Good. I think we should check it out.
I once heard a powerful story about a man who stood in his truth with such conviction in who he was, he would not be moved. Someone stepped out of the crowd and said, "Are you Martin Luther King?" He said, "Yes, I am," and the well-dressed man spit on him. King took out his handkerchief and wiped the hate from his suit, gave it back to the man and said, "I believe this belongs to you. I will lift you up, do what I can do. I see your heart, I know your pain, I've been there too. I will hold you high while you do what you have to do. I am clear who is standing here. I believe this belongs to you." I once had a powerful story I used to carry around. I thought it was you all this time that held my spirit down. But now I know the truth of who I came here to be. You are my angel in disguise, not my enemy. So I thank you for the part you played in this dance we had to do. I give you back the love that's real. I believe this belongs to you. I will lift you up. I'll do what I can do. I see your heart, I know your pain, I've been there too. I will hold you high while you do what you have to do. I am clear who is standing here. I believe this belongs to you. I will lift you up, do what I can do. I see your heart, I felt your pain. I'll pray for you. I will hold you high while you do what you have to do. I am clear who is standing here. I believe this belongs to you. I give you back the love that's real. I believe this belongs to you.
Esther, my friend, what? It still moves me. Those words, your song, the way that you sang them, the expression, the way it was so brilliantly written, it still moves me to tears. And I'm not afraid to say that, what
In love.
yeah.
I'm going to return this love to you. Not
Yes.
return this to you. I'm going to return this love to you because that's all that there is. Yes?
Really.
Yes.
And that's the epitome of forgiveness, right? And so how do you stand so powerfully in who you are, in that knowing of who you are, so that the distorted view of other people doesn't take root in you? I mean, I think you sang about it here so powerfully, but what is that like for you?
In a practical way, because that's what people want to know about, is how I do that in a moment by moment, day to day experience. And for me, just being in recovery, so grateful to have been introduced to the process of inventory, where I'm not inventorying what you think about me, Sunshine. I'm inventorying what I think about me.
Right.
About me. And when I go in there and look at my belief system, my unchecked belief system about some of the things that I believed about me, it's like, whoa, if we're looking at the perfect outcome of the law of attraction, no wonder certain things have happened. No wonder I've attracted certain opinions about me, because where did that opinion start? It started within me, about me. Where did abandonment start? Who abandons you before you abandon yourself or betray yourself? So I have to, on a daily basis, take inventory about my beliefs and my thoughts. When they feel like they're out of alignment with love, with self-love, then it's important that I check that and that I surrender that. And I surrender to that power greater than myself, which is myself. And as I surrender to that power greater than myself, I'm actually surrendering to my real self.
Yeah.
So as I'm surrendering to my real self by letting go of my own illusions about myself, then I can stand in that truth and not be moved no matter what you say about me.
Yep. And for me, it's about what you call inventory, what we call inventory. It's that self-analysis, that self-check, and it is about releasing victimhood. I'm not a victim here. I'm actually, if anything, I might be a victim to my own perpetual way of thinking and seeing the world, because the bottom line is that even if I was raised with these thoughts, I get as an adult today to look at and go, is this really true? Is this the truth of who I am? Is this the truth of humanity? Is this the truth? Or have I been misled, and then I shall be misled no more? Right? Because some of us have been raised with racist thoughts or sexist thoughts or thoughts that belittle other people, but is my part in this that I continue to carry it forth and enlarge upon it and make it grow and then act and live upon it? Or am I checking myself and going, hey, I'm not the victim here. This might have been how I was raised, how society grew me or groomed me. But in this stage of the game, if I'm believing in separation, I'm going down the wrong path, for living a joyous and fulfilling life, for living a life of oneness and of wholeness, and especially that life of love that you're talking about. Let me, in fact, return love to you. Like, that is really the only thing that's real.
And I can only return love to you, Sunshine, and to those beloveds that's listening to us right now. I can only return love to you when I am steeped in it for myself about it. I can't give you what I don't have. So it's just so important for me to just continue to such compassion, self-compassion. Continue to dig, continue to unlearn the lies about myself, so that when I unlearn the lie about myself, you can't lie to me about me.
You can't lie to me. Hello. I know me. I know you. You can't lie to me. Right.
And so, this next segment, when we asked Michael, how does he approach self-awareness and self,
Hmm.
and I thought it was really powerful.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Obviously, the practices have become a way of living. They're a way of life. They're not like separated from my life. But as I stated earlier, one of the first movements to awakening is to grow in a deep sense of self-love and appreciation. Without that, we create vibrational barriers to our own good. We keep bumping into our own inner blockages, and the world just keeps feeding us back what we don't love about ourselves. So we have to be very honest and embrace ourselves the way we are, whatever it is, and notice where maybe we're looking at ourselves through somebody else's lens and we're putting ourselves down. So this is inner work that's necessary that both of you know about as ministers of this teaching. So it begins with that. And then the practices always come down to the meditative practice. It always comes down to prayer. It always comes down to visioning. It always comes down to study. It always comes down with being around people that are going to keep you in high vibrational conversation, so that there's a constant arc of unfolding. This is not a hit it and quit it situation. It's not, I got it done and I'm through. It becomes a way of living. So that I like to tell people that at some point in your life, there's a tipping point that happens. And as we're hearing this siren in the background, I think we're just lifting our consciousness to the fact that somebody's getting help. So in our spiritual practice, it becomes a way of living. And there's a tipping point that happens where our spiritual growth and unfoldment and becoming more ourselves actually becomes the most important intention that we carry. And everything under that is important, but it is not as important as that, so that when you're under the paradigm of the main thing for me is my own growth and unfoldment, expanded awareness, so that I can be of a greater servant, I can be a greater servant to the light, greater servant to the presence. Something happens in that tipping point. And there are different things by which we can go after success. You go after financial success. We can go after, business, this health. There's so many structures that people go into, and you should go into these structures and make yourself successful in these structures. But ultimately, when spiritual growth, if you don't want to use the word spiritual, when self-awareness becomes the top and everything else fits in that, something happens and the universal presence by law matches you at that intention. And things unfold oftentimes without you specifically asking for things. You heard the scripture, even while they're asking him, I'm already giving. You're at a different level. So people are growing into that area. They may start off wanting to heal their body temple. They may start off wanting to heal their finances. They may start off wanting to heal their relationship issues. They want to be successful in this area and that area, and all of that is good. But the moment in which you really want to be yourself, you want to grow and expand awareness, something happens that you don't make happen. Something happens and you come under grace. You come under the law of grace because you've given your entire being to you being you, which is what God wants. God wants you to be you. Everybody else is taken. God wants you to be you. And if you don't do you, you won't be done, And so that's just part of the gestalt of how we all want to walk in this world, ultimately.
You don't do you, you won't be done. I love that, and that is so true. On a personal level, and the people that I've had the pleasure of working with, until you align with who you really are, you're not done, and you will never be at peace.
Yeah.
Your good will chase you down. The highest version of you is going to haunt you until you say yes to it. And I just really admire and respect that he talks about when you put your higher self first, whether you call it God, whether you call it your highest self, whether you know, call it the presence or the source, whatever, you know, people have told me, and I've told this to myself, God, I'm too busy to do that kind of spiritual work. I'll do it, you know, every, you know, 10 minutes, you know, I'll do it like 10 minutes here or 10 minutes there or whatever. But when I made the decision to not schedule my spiritual practice around my busy life, but to schedule my busy life around my spiritual practice, that's when everything started to change for me. That's when I was just excited to see what God was going to do next. I didn't have to make anything happen because it was already there. Because I made that aspect of me a priority in my life. So, I really,
Yeah. It it when I try to go back, over the last several decades and begin to just kind of ask myself the question, like, when did I become interested in becoming self-aware? And then what were those steps that I took to put my growth, my self-growth first, and a lot of it had to do with, when I was first getting sober, when I first realized that the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction were taking me down a path that I didn't want to go to myself, but I had to surrender to this self-awareness. I had to surrender and actually begin to check myself, as we talked about earlier, and begin to allow the grace that Michael talked about to flow and fall upon me. Because in those moments where I was becoming self-aware, becoming aware of this God presence that is living me, it was then that these little steps and little things started to shift and change in my life. So it wasn't only about the drugs and the alcohol. Then it became about the cigarettes. It became about the sugar. It became about how to live a healthy life. It became an awareness of my spiritual practice, like you're talking about. And all of it also was just about this place of being honest with myself. Like, stop lying to myself. Oh, I'm good. I'm okay. Everything is all right. No, it was just like, no, here's another area where I am not being true to myself. And I don't mean the small s self, but true to that great I am presence, that I am presence that is living in, through, and as me, that I was practicing self-betrayal, that I was not honest, that I wasn't even capable of doing those things while I was still playing small. And I love that he talks about this, especially today as we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King, that it is that self-knowing, it is that self-awareness, and that everything kind of falls into place when I only when I don't focus on you and what you're doing wrong and how you wronged me and how the world owes me this and how the world's going to hell in a handbasket. When I shift the focus to my own self-awareness, my own practice, my own health and wholeness, the knowing that God is living in, through, and as me, that this powerful presence that has created everything is right where I am. It's not outside of me. That then, and only then, that there is this grace and transformation begins to happen. And it might sound like it's a miracle to a whole lot of people, or like way out there, like, what have I been drinking? But it is the absolute truth that I have watched your life, Esther, transform, my life transform, as a result of these powerful teachings that precede Dr. Michael Beckwith, that precede Dr. King, but that they tapped into so powerfully, that we, because we've listened, because we've heard, because we get to also practice what they've practiced, that we get to live this life of change, that we get to awaken to our spiritual magnificence, that we get to, as a result of this, participate and create a world that works for all, that we get an opportunity to have our own healing in such a way that life becomes beautiful, and that we get an opportunity to actually see that, no, I am you, you are me. We get to bathe in that oneness and that wholeness and that peace and that power. Like, I'm having a great time. Just, I mean, like, and all of this is just as we're celebrating Dr. King.
And I would just like to share with our audience, just some really simple, tidbits or suggestions on, how to awaken to your true identity of wholeness. And I know that, like, the first step for me has been such self-compassion. We're so hard on ourselves. And if we can come into that self-compassion and self-love, then that can be the foundation of everything else that we do. In fact, that self-compassion is your communing with the divine, because the divine within you doesn't judge you. It doesn't even know about you. So I think the first step to reconnecting to our authentic self is self-compassion. Create a spiritual practice, a ritual, a spiritual practice that you're doing consistently and every day. I know that Reverend Sunshine has talked about affirming yourself. Just simple affirmations. That's the opposite of, and an affirmation doesn't mean, saying only positive things about yourself. An affirmation could be saying something horrible about yourself. So you want to make sure that your affirmations are in alignment with your true identity and not your false identity. And as we continue to grow into that, all things will be added. And so I think we have one more clip of Michael. I'm not sure. Do we?
Yeah, we have one, after this amazing opportunity to be with him, what was left was just kind of like, hey, any final thoughts? And of course, he's got some amazing final thoughts. Let's check those out.
I want everyone to be reminded that who you are matters. And as a unique expression of divinity, you're important. The world may have said you're unimportant or don't matter or insignificant. That's a lie, and creates tributaries of separation. You want to begin to wake up with the awareness that you matter so much to the presence that's never an absence. And that your work on yourself to be a greater version of yourself is what the presence wants from you, so that you're able to carry more of the cosmic energy, your body temple, your mental body, your psychological body, all of the subtle bodies come under the aegis of the celestial body. You're able to carry more energy of God into the world, that you're significant. And so there's no throwaway people. God doesn't make any extra people. You know what I mean? Everyone is significant. There's a reason. There's a facet of the diamond that you get to reflect that no one else can reflect quite like you. So you have to embrace that. And you have to embrace that and hold that in love, so that you don't diminish yourself, you don't kowtow, you don't put your head down. You walk in the awareness of knowing who you are, whose you belong to. And then ways are made out of no way, you see.
Right. Wow. There are no special people. There are no extra people. There are no mistaken people. There are no chosen people. There are no other
disposable. Yeah.
People. There are no people. We are all chosen, and we are all wanted, and we are all loved by this infinite presence that reveals itself in its totality at every point in the universe. And so as we wake up to our magnificence, I wake up to your magnificence, no matter what our differences are. And I think that that's the greatest cosmic joke, is to make us all so different so that we can all wake up to realize that we're all the same.
Yeah.
And I think that we are wrapping up now.
Yeah. I mean, I thank you. Thank you, Esther, for, doing this amazing show. I'm so grateful that we've had this journey together. I'm so grateful that Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith has been such a major part of our lives, and that we've, learned so much and have taken that on and have blossomed and bloomed so amazingly. I think it's a testament to Dr. King and all of the amazing people whose shoulders we stand on. And, we can go on for hours, but we can't. At some point, we get to open it up to our community who has lots of questions. And
I
so,
want to thank them so much for being here
yes.
today. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yes. Thank you to everyone who's joined today. Thank you, Esther and Sunshine, for an amazing conversation and presentation today. I want to start off by just thanking you for what you brought to light for me during your presentation, which was really that there's a time and a place for everything and every reaction. We have a comment here that really wants to know, with all this going on and the changes in regarding to voting laws and society, why do you think we should be quiet?
Everything that we've spoken about today isn't about being quiet, and it's not about being overly responsive. It's about not being reactionary, but being responsive. And so if you are led to be quiet, everybody has what is theirs to do. There are some people who protest. There are some people who are getting voting laws changed. There are some people who do so many other things. There are some people who sit in silence and support those other people, right? So understand that silence is not acquiescence. Silence is not doing nothing. Silence is the dynamic, infinite power that guides you to a higher consciousness, which guides you to higher effective action. So do you want to take action just from I should be doing something, or do you want to take action from the divine doer within me is actually doing it, and then see the result from that? Do you want to be reactionary, or do you want to be responsive? So yeah, it's not about being quiet.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think there's this part where people say love God, trust people, and I go the opposite way. I trust God, I trust infinite life, I trust that indwelling power and presence, and I love people. Now, in my trusting God, what I'm simply knowing is that through my spiritual practice, through my being silent, through my asking what is mine to do, that I am given that divine message to either be silent or to find my voice, to use my voice for the greater good. And so it is really all about trusting God, trusting life, and loving people. And I think that was messaged throughout today's conversation. And so it's not about being quiet for the sake of being quiet, but it's about trusting in dwelling power and presence, getting our orders, and loving people. Through it all, loving people.
Thank you, Sunshine and Esther. Next, I love this question because it is a call for action. So they are wanting to know, what can we do to help heal the disease of racism within our own churches and organization?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll take a go at that one. It starts right here. The bottom line is that even as a person of color, I have internalized racism that is still active in my own life. And so as I begin to heal that internalized racism, that internalized sexism, that internalized oppression, that it all starts here. And so I can't really be doing a whole lot out there until I do in here. And so again, even as Dr. Beckwith talked about it, as my own self-awareness becomes primary, what begins to happen is I begin to live differently. I begin to be that voice. I begin to say, oh no, this is not acceptable. This is not okay. Are you aware that this is what's happening? But I have to come to that awareness within first before it actually becomes manifest in my communities. It also means, reading books together, becoming aware together. I don't have to do that process by myself. I can do it in conjunction with community, but it really is about that self-awareness first, so that I'm not talking out of both sides of my neck.
And thank you, Sunshine. And like I said earlier, you can't be aware of you can't acknowledge what you're not aware of, and you can't heal what you won't acknowledge. So I believe that first of all, that racism is a symptom of racial trauma, and racial trauma, is a symptom of a spiritual disease, and that we are all suffering from racial trauma. Overt racial trauma, subtle racial trauma, how we've been indoctrinated and so forth. And I believe that the first moment that someone put into our minds of otherness, that we were traumatized, because it is so out of alignment with the truth of who we are. And then of course there's the obvious ways in which we've been racially traumatized. And I think that when white people can acknowledge that they've been traumatized as well as Black people, and that Black people can acknowledge that, wow, I'm walking around here, I look successful, I feel successful, but deep down inside, I'm still holding on to this deep wound of racial trauma, and that this has to be healed in order for these other areas of my life to be healed. I think that's what needs to be acknowledged in our spiritual communities. And then we bring in teachers and counselors that know how to address racial trauma and intergenerational racism, so that we could heal at that core level.
Thank you. All right. The next question I have is, how do you combat intergenerational trauma? Personally, this individual says they are angry and want justice for their ancestors. Also, through colonization and slavery, some feel lost and have no family.
Right. And so this person sounds like their wound, that unhealed, festering wound is really speaking. So I think the first thing to do is just to have so much compassion for your unhealed woundedness, and that you might feel a little stuck in that and lost and not know where to go. And what I want you to know is that our ancestors they've left the density of their human incarnation. They're not interested in you getting revenge. They're not even interested in you getting justice. They're interested in you awakening to oneness, to your oneness and to the oneness of all, and knowing that it is from that place that you will be led to divine right action. So you have a calling, you have a work to do. And like I said earlier, do you want to do that work from being reactionary and hurt and unhealed? Or do you want to do that work where your voice, Martin Luther King, and it's not that he didn't have issues, I'm sure that he was scared a lot of times. I'm sure that he was triggered a lot of times. He just had a spiritual practice and a spiritual relationship that allowed him to transcend that and grow from those painful experiences that he had. So in your calling, we bless your calling, and it's great that you have this calling that you want to be a part of the solution. And it is only in your spiritual practice and coming to wholeness that you can become a part of the solution instead of continuing on with the problem.
Thank you. I have one more question that you might be able to piggyback the answer, Sunshine, onto this question.
Cool.
So this question says, there is a movement towards reparation. Do you foresee that being possible?
Anything is possible. All things are possible in God. Everything is possible. Well, for me, I'm kind of wrapping both questions together, even though they're quite different. Is that the moment I recognize that my life is the life of God, that God created everything out of itself. Therefore, there's nothing that can separate me from life itself, that I am the beautiful, magnificent, powerful, perfect way that God is showing up in human form. When I recognize that, and when I am so steeped in that knowing, what begins to happen for me is that I recognize that my ancestors and that others, that this human body, the color of my skin, the curliness of my hair, the width of my nose or my lips or the shape of my body, that all of those things are the accessories of the perfect, divine, magnificent life that is God. And just like Michael said earlier, he goes, I'm a black man. So what? Like, that is, for me, that is like, hey, here is the way God is expressing in human form. The moment in which I actually become a practice inclusion and recognizing the variety and the difference, and recognize that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That moment where I become so self-aware and so steep that I can stand in my truth like Dr. King stood in his truth. I don't have to worry about reparations. I don't have to worry about healing the ancestors. The moment that happens in the here and now, because there is no time and space in God, the moment that happens for me, it happens all the way back, generations backwards and forwards. And so that's why it's so key for that self-awareness, for that, like, you know what? God's got this. Like, I don't have to fight. I don't have to effort. What I get to do is place on my altar the hierarchy of my own self-awareness, my own oneness with all life, and that there is nothing that separates us. Nothing. That moment that awareness really sits in with me is the moment that healing happens, that reparations happen, that a transcendence happens, and that I can live in peace, and that I begin to see differently, and that my experience is indeed different. And that's, I haven't arrived there yet, like Dr. King. I might not get there with you, but I've seen the promised land. I've seen that promise that the moment we awaken to our divinity, the moment we awaken to our spiritual magnificence, that it is in that moment that this quickening happens, and that humanity is healed from this idea and this disease of oppression, of racism, of separation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. First of all, you better speak, girl. I really loved what you said. And what I just want to share is that to fight for reparations, that might be what is someone's to do. That might be their calling to work toward that, to see that that is done. And but our healing, as Sunshine so eloquently spoke about just now, our healing is not about whether that ever happens or not. Because in scripture, it talks about my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, or my thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are not your ways. So reparations might happen in a bigger way than our limited version of that could ever imagine. And, absolutely, we want it. It would be a wonderful, thing to happen. But what we don't want is for our justice and our freedom and our peace of mind to be contingent upon that result and that outcome. Because if we do, we're still enslaved and we're still in bondage.
Yes.
Just a really quick personal story. My dad was a Baptist minister and the love of my life, and he made his transition many years ago. And, when some other family members made their transition, some things that I felt rightfully belonged to me were not given to me. And I almost gave myself an ulcer worrying about those things. And when I finally hit my bottom and put those things on the altar and felt the presence of my father, like every single day, it's like, whoa, nothing can take my father away from me. He's with me right now. And I just get a call the other day from some person from back in the day saying, hey, I have transcripts of your dad's sermons. Would you like them? So when it is yours, it cannot be withheld from you. And if it is not, it doesn't matter. Amen.
All right. Well, I understand, Reverend Sunshine and Esther, that you'll be visiting Unity Village soon in August for the Celebration of Soul Conference that'll be organized by the People of African Descent New Thought Group. Is there anything that either of you would like to share about the upcoming event?
I'm going to be there, and registration is open. So I encourage you to get on board, get registered now, because you don't want to miss this. You definitely want to be there.
And I'll also be presenting there as well as the musical inspiration.
Okay. This has been a great dialogue, and I wish we had more time to continue the conversation. Let's see. I apologize. Let's see. I want to make sure we caught all the questions. Yes. All right. If you'd like to connect with either one of today's speakers, their information is currently on the screen. It will also be included on the follow-up email that will be sent to you immediately following this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Much love to you.
Much love. It's been a great joy to be with all of you today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sunshine. I love you.
I love you too, Esther. Can't wait to squeeze you.
I love you, Michael Beckwith. You're our teacher, our love.
Thanks, Michael. And thank you, Unity. Thank you for putting on this amazing program today. We appreciate you.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Bye for now.